we started doing blood tests. To date, we've done about 200. We've done 50 odd on MS patients, and it looks as if this could be a way of measuring peroxynitrite activity. Now, I thought at the time it would be really useful for LDN prescribing. We'd say, you know, we'll give you LDN if your peroxynitrites are up, but actually it's not, because it's not that sensitive at the lower level, so we just give them LDN anyway. But we developed this in our own lab in Glasgow, and it's the first in the world, as far as we know. We don't know anybody else that's offering this test. And we're not offering it either at the moment because we need to validate it. This is just some of the data in the first 40-odd patients. The green line is just to show that I can't make charts very well because I don't know what that is and I couldn't get rid of it. But basically, it didn't really tell us anything as far as LDN was concerned. You know, most of the people that we tested on LDN had undetectable levels, but that, you know, there wasn't a big enough number for us to say that this T-score assay, we're calling it, is actually significant in that or not. But it could be a way of picking up disease activity. It could be. If we can correlate this and validate it against the CSF findings and say, well, this could be a way of actually looking at the progressive stages of MS, and instead of saying, oh, I'm sorry, you've got progressive MS, that's a terrible disease, bye, we could say, right, actually, we can try and pick up when your disease is active and do something about it. And that something could be LDN, that something could be Copaxone, it could be something else. What we've found so far is roughly a quarter of patients with progressive MS have got raised nitrotyrosine levels in blood samples. Now, that might mean nothing. It could mean that it opens a window of opportunity for us to treat them. And that, as I say, that could be LDN, it could be steroids, obviously not for a long term if it's going to be steroids. Copaxone, there's a paper came out 6 weeks ago showing that Copaxone works not just by modifying the T1 helper cells, but also it reduces peroxynitrates. So this is a very interesting area that's developed, you know, almost by accident. We didn't expect to find this. We were just doing it because we wanted to find the mechanism of LDN. So it could be this way of highlighting increased immune activity in the progressive forms of MS, which, you know, we think if we can validate it, if we get a bit further forward, and we're moving ahead to do the validation as soon as possible, it could unlock treatment for a lot of people who currently are not getting offered anything because they've considered to have an untreatable progressive type of the disease. Because it does progress. There must be disease activity there. It's just not clinically obvious. It's not like there are relapsing remitters who have got a spectacular loss of function and you say, God, something's going on here. But the majority of people in the UK, I'm not sure about here, do not get offered any treatment if they've got progressive MS. So if we can identify these periods of activity, then there is a potential to get disease-sparing treatment in there. And also, it would save people being exposed to what are very toxic drugs in some cases when they've not got disease activity or they don't have a high level of disease activity. So, you know, we're excited about it. Leaves a lot of unanswered questions, though, as it always does. Any good researcher always puts at the end of their paper, more research is required. Does LDN work solely through an endorphin increase? I don't think so. I've got a hunch that it doesn't. I think it works also directly on the peroxynitrites. Does LDN or other treatments, will they affect the assay that we've got? And, you know, how do we respond to a raised assay? One of the reasons we're not offering this test widely, we only do it within our clinic, is because if someone goes along to the neurologist and says, I've got a high level of nitrotyrosine, what are you going to do about it? It's going to be a really funny conversation because, first of all, the guy probably not heard of it. Jonathan or Ireland, when I said, how much do you know about this, Jonathan? He says, I only know what you tell me. Most neurologists don't know any about this. So it's a bit unfair to give people false hope. But at the same time, if we can validate it, then we think we are somewhere. And what are the cost implications for treating people? You know, this much, much bigger group of people is much more expensive to treat, but then not treating them is really expensive. If you don't treat them, then they get worse and they become economically inactive and require care and all the rest of it. The cost of not treating somebody, never mind the ethics of you should definitely treat someone, is huge. So, you know, that's a different, hopefully that is an argument we will get into at some point. Now, I mentioned this to David earlier on. He says, don't tell this story. He says, no, this is exactly the kind of story we don't want people to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because it's just an incredible story. And it is, as soon as I've told you, you have to forget it, okay? Because it's the kind of thing that gives LDN a bad name. But it's true, and it's stunning. One of my patients in my practice, a 60-year-old male, looked absolutely shocking. He was awful, really ill-looking guy, because he was in the toilet all the time. 9 times a day he had bloody motions, and he'd had for years. He'd had blood transfusions, he'd had 19 colonoscopies, and he came down, and I wasn't thinking LDN at all. I was just thinking, God, he looks as if he's going to die. He looked awful. So I said, you know, in a GP consultation, we've got 10 minutes, so, you know, by the time he had told me all his woes, I didn't leave any time to really talk about LDN. So I said, come back next week, and we're going to have a chat about this other treatment And I got him convinced, because he has to go and pay for the treatment as well. It's £15 a month to go and get the treatment. So it's not like I can't prescribe it over like a normal drug. So you have to tell people why that is and explain it. It's a few minutes of development before you, but he said, I'll do anything to try and make this better. It's just awful. So we started it in 2007, and then I forgot all about him because I never saw him again. And then he came in just in August, just there, and he said to me, and he looked great. And he said, I've been meaning to tell you. I've not had a single bloody motion for a year. That wasn't him swearing, it was a description. If I've not had a single motion for a year, he said, all the consultants, none of them have heard of this drug. None of them know anything about it, and they can't believe how well I am. And he looked really well. He was in complete remission. And then it suddenly thought, what is going on here? I've not been writing scripts for this guy. And he said, no, I only took it once. He took one dose. He says, I don't like drugs. He says, I just took one dose. And I thought, so forget that story, right? But he took it once, and he was well for a year. And he said to him, I'm really worried it will come back. So I did his blood, and his level was low in the TI score. And I said, well, for what it's worth, at the moment you don't seem to be active. But how that worked, I have no idea, even after hearing the stuff. But certainly Crohn's seems to be very susceptible to doing well with LDN. So anyway, forget that story because it's bad. So I'm going to tell you another one. My practice manager and the NHS practice I've got is a real worrier, and she's got psoriasis. So when she's worried, her psoriasis gets a lot worse. And just the other day there, she came in, she wears gloves now because she was recently diagnosed. I better click this thing. She's gutted psoriasis. She had that for years and years. And the thing with psoriasis, it's quite hard to hide it when you're stressed, so it makes you more stressed. She was then diagnosed with palmoplantar pustulosis. If anybody knows what that is, it's a kind of psoriasis of the hands and feet, and you get wee spots of pus appear. It's very painful. She was having to wear gloves all the time. And she came in and said to me, and she is a bit of a guinea pig, I put her on various things. Usually we've got a big wheel that she runs around in. And I say, well, I'm going to try you on this and this. So she came in and she said, have you got anything for this? And I said, well, why don't we try an LDN? So we started 1 milligram last month. And she's doing really, really well. Okay. Don't want to get too excited about it because it's early days and psoriasis is such a difficult thing to treat. It starts with an anecdote. Don't be scared of anecdotes. We've got to start with an anecdote and you get excited and then you go on and eventually produce some data that people pay attention to. Nobody believes anecdotes. I don't care. They're great. I like them. So the next steps, we're going to do a study. We need to get the funding for that, but it's 90% of the way there. We're going to do a conference in Glasgow next year, if anybody wants to come. 25th of April, and hopefully we'll have some of the speakers from here who will come along to that. And this is going to be the first European LDN conference because we want to raise the awareness of it, and this is one way to do it. We've got Glasgow City Council, very excited about it. I keep telling them that there's going to be 5,000 people at the conference. And they'll go, oh, God, they'll fill all the hotels. I didn't tell them it was going to be 50, but, but they're supporting us, and, they're going to, so we've got good support, and I said, and we'll have it in Glasgow for the next 20 years. So, I'll not move to any other European city. We'll be the LDN capital of Europe. So, I've told them a few slightly dodgy things, but we're trying to build up a prescribers network. And we've got a website trying to support people and train people because we need more doctors to do this. The more science we've got, doctors are, we are like children. We need comfort. We need support. We need that support blanket of science. If you got that and people say, I've got that, you feel quite comfortable and you think, oh, well, maybe I can do this. You get some people who are a bit maverick like me that will just say, I don't fancy doing it anyway. But most doctors are normal and they like to have science and they like to have the comfort of that. And that's their security blanket. So we've got to give them that security and say, this is going to be, so our conference will be quite scientific, on purpose. It's a wonderful treatment, Just add the FUL and it becomes okay. It's a very, very good treatment. We need more scientific data because that's what's going to convince people. That's what's going to make more doctors prescribe and therefore more patients are going to get the treatment to try and do that. Been really nice to define the mechanism. I think we've got a lot of twists and turns before we know that. I think there's a lot of very interesting science before we actually know how it works, but it would be fantastic to do that. And we could have a new paradigm, a new way of looking at MS, rather than just say we've got relapsing remitters and we give them this and we've got these. We may have a new treatment, we may have a new way of giving the treatment, and it's very exciting. So I'm very grateful to that patient who came and asked me for LDN 4 years ago. Thanks very much.